Okay, so I'm Amy Nichols, and I'm in the Department of Geography and Integrative Conservation. My particular area of focus is on the intersection of weather and society, so my background is in meteorology and anthropology. And I'm here to talk about a little nugget of a thought about research on public understandings of hazardous weather. So my main questions, and these are not research questions, just things that I'm thinking about, are how do people understand the weather in the places where they work and live? So the places where they spend the most time, the spaces where they have a connection to that place. And is science the only way that people know the weather? Do they only know it through the forecast, through the National Weather Service, through the Weather Channel? Or do they make sense of the weather in other ways? So let's take an example, because I personally like examples. I don't have any data, but I got to use this one with permission. So this is my mother. She's not the rhinoceros. My mother is a biology teacher, so she does engage in scientific thought every single day. But she also is an avid gardener. She loves her gardener, and she lives in north central Florida, so she lives just on that cusp of where it's going to freeze. So, as you know, this has been a particularly awful winter, and she's had to be worried about this a lot. So what does she do? She checks the weather. This is the National Weather Service. That's the site she always uses. And lo and behold, sometimes it says it's going to be 31, 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, if she just went by the scientific information, if she just trusted the National Weather Service's forecast, she'd be covering her plants and bringing in the ones that are in pots and breaking her back doing it because she's got a lot of plants. But she has this little habit where she always adds a couple of degrees to the low. Well, she does this because she's been working in this garden for 10 years. And in that 10 years, she's noticed that it says it's going to freeze or just drop below freezing, and then it doesn't freeze in her garden. That's because the forecast is for the airport, not for her backyard. And her backyard has a very different structure than the airport. So the dominant approach for weather and society literature, the literature that I tend to be embedded in, is to be based on a deficit model, that people are empty, that they don't know the weather until the scientific information comes in and is poured into them, and suddenly, ta-da, they know it. And also an assumption that better communication will lead to better understanding. If we just speak louder, if we just speak clearer, if we just dumb it down a little bit, people will understand. So you get a lot of calls for education campaigns. Let's teach people what a warning is. Let's teach people what probability of precipitation is. And you get a lot of calls for communicating uncertainty and how best to do that. You also get a lot of research in which claims of knowledge are based on a scientific understanding of the weather. So let's take another example. This one is from Robert Drost, and he was testing people's knowledge and how it related to their protective action decision making. And this is an actual question from his survey. Which of the following is needed to produce a downburst? Well, I would argue that probably a meteorologist needs to know this, maybe a pilot needs to know this, but do people really need to know this? Do they have to know this to be considered knowledgeable rather than ignorant? And is it necessary to test lay knowledge against scientific knowledge? Well, lay knowledge in other areas would suggest possibly no. Climate and climate change research says that it's more productive to ask how people are making sense of climate and the ways it might change as both a physical and intellectual artifact in everyday spaces. How are they putting it into practice? So it's not a question of whether my mom is right in adding 1, 2, or 3 degrees to the forecast. The question is, that's what she does, and it works. And in air pollution and air quality research, they found that public understandings of air pollution are strongly rooted in place, that they are based on lived experiences, and that the public questions science's validity, biases, spatial scale, and uncertainty. So back to my mother again, it's strongly rooted in place. She can make an estimate for her yard. She can't make an estimate for anybody else's. And it's strongly based on the fact that she's been working there for 10 years, and because of that, she questions the forecast's validity and spatial scale for where she's trying to get a forecast. So back to my main questions. How do people understand the weather in the places where they live? And do they only understand it through science? Well, perhaps no, but I don't really know because we need research. We need research on how people make sense of the weather where they live, including experience, beliefs, perceptions, and of course, through science. So thank you.